So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today at this WISE webinar, and we're talking about how to empower neurodivergent women in the workplace in 2024. Next slide, please, Charmaine. So my name's Jack, pronouns he, him. I'm Head of Products and Services Delivery, Diversity and Inclusion at WISE. I'm going to be just hosting the webinar today and fielding the questions to the panelists a little bit later on in the session. And we'll be handing over to each of our speakers today. But first, we'll just go through some housekeeping. So the webinar is currently being recorded, so it's being recorded as we speak. So if you don't want to be involved in the recording, obviously your mics and cameras are disabled at the moment, but as it says further down the screen there, mics and cameras will be enabled during the Q&A. So if you want to come up and ask a question, just be aware that you'll be that we are recording. As I mentioned, delegate sound and video is restricted during the first half of the session when we've got the 3 speaker presentations, but will be enabled to ask questions in the second half. If you have any practical questions regarding sound or video, please use the chat or Q&A function of Teams webinar, and either Charmaine or Hannah will be able to assist you. We will have a Q&A section in the second half of the session, so if you've got questions you want to ask, feel free to pop them in the chat or the Q&A function during the presentations, and we'll come to them during the Q&A. You can also, if you're feeling brave, come off mute and ask a question directly in the second half of the session as well. And we also have the reactions and the comments facilities enabled as well, so please feel free to use those during the session. So just a quick note on accessibility. So Microsoft Teams does have live captioning capabilities. So if you want to turn these on, you can go to More at the top of the screen, Language and Speech, and then turn on live captions. And Nina is going to be using Slido for her presentation. Slido is actually compatible with certain screen reader technologies. It's compatible with VoiceOver in Apple products, and you can use also a built-in screen reader on Chrome. And we've posted a link in the chat that has a few more details about this if you need to enable that sort of functionality. So as mentioned, we've got 3 speakers today. We've got Nina Parsons from PAM Wellness, Lucy Barratt-Smith from AtkinsRealis, Beata Tofil from Balfour Beatty, and then we've got a Q&A where you'll be able to ask questions of any and all of them, and please do. And then we'll be closing at 11:55, ready for a 12 o'clock finish. And without further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Nina, who is also going to share her own slides for her section.
Thank you very much, Jack. Well, thank you everyone. Pleasure to be here today, particularly as it's Neurodiversity Celebration Week. As Jack mentioned, I will be using Slido because I'd be really keen to get some interaction from you in terms of sharing some of your thoughts with me today in my presentation. What you'll need to do is to grab your mobile phones, and if you go to camera and you just scan that QR code, it should then take you into Slido, where you'll find that the questions will be posted as I come to that particular slide. Okay, so thank you very much. As I said, so just to explain a little bit about who I am. My name is Nina Parsons. I'm a chartered occupational psychologist and director of psychology at PAM Group. We're an occupational health provider. Most of my career has been spent doing consultancy work within organisations, and the last 10 years of my career I've really focused looking at not just leadership development, recruitment, selection, organisational design and development, but also through the lens of neurodiversity. And I've been focusing in that area, as I said, for about 10 years or so. My talk today is going to be focusing on how organisations can provide tailored support to support women who are neurodivergent in the workplace, and also to explain a little bit about how we as an organisation support neurodivergent women and their organisations that they work for. In terms of PAM Group itself, it was formed in 2004 in Warrington. However, we have clinics across the UK and Ireland. We provide services to both private and public sector organisations and support more than 1 million employees, over 1,000 businesses and organisations. So it just gives you an idea of what the range of services that we cover in terms of how we support employees through a range of offerings that we have. So my first question to you all then is, what industry sectors are you working? I'm very keen to find out and interested to know. So if you wouldn't mind just typing in what industry sector you work in, whether that's biomedical, tech, IT. Okay, great. Thank you. Lots of engineers. Excellent. Really interesting mix. Some people are still typing. That's great. Right, so engineering is by far the most popular, which doesn't surprise me really, given Wise's agenda. So, but great to see that there are so many industries being represented here today. That's really great to know. So, as you might be aware, this is actually Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And what do we mean by the term neurodiversity? Because in one sense, everyone could say, well, I am kind of neurodiverse, in the broadest possible sense of the word. But for us and the work that we do, when we mean neurodiverse, we're talking about neurodivergent in terms of brain difference and how some people's brains work differently to others who we may call neurotypical in the way that their brain functions and works. And that could be anything from the way that people learn, to the way they think, to the way they interact. And these brain differences have over the last few years been considered in a more positive light, as we're moving away from the medical model and deficit model to one of more social inclusion and providing a more positive frame of reference for neurodiversity as a whole. And that we know that at PAM Group we support individuals predominantly who are neurodivergent, whose conditions are neurodevelopmental, and that means that they've been there present since childhood, and that includes autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. I'm not going to focus too much on the conditions today as we don't have a lot of time, but this slide hopefully gives you an idea of some of the key traits that you often find with some of these conditions. I think one of the key things to know is that obviously these conditions can co-occur in individuals, and therefore they can be having traits of more than one of these conditions. Sometimes a person's had a formal diagnosis of one condition and not another. But obviously there are some challenges that come across with people who are in the workplace. Perhaps there are certain aspects of their job roles or ways of working which can challenge their ability to maybe thrive and do their best, and often it requires some level of adaptations, which is where we come in and support. But I'd just be interested to find out, what are some of the key challenges that you think neurodivergent women may be facing at work? So if anyone could just take a moment. It's anonymous, so please feel free to write either a word or words or a sentence. Great, thank you. Yeah, burnout. Great. A real mix there, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head for sure. Burnout is a big one, absolutely. I will be touching on that a little bit today. Understanding, absolutely. Great. And I'm sure there are many potentially neurodivergent women in the audience today, as well as neurotypical individuals. So it's great to see also responses from a wide range of people. Thank you very much for that. That's really helpful. So understanding, burnout and confidence are the key 3 words that are coming out from that. So thank you. So alongside those challenges that you very much highlighted, neurodiverse women obviously bring many strengths to the workplace. And as a hidden disability, you may not even be aware you have colleagues who are neurodivergent. So I think it's important also to just take a moment to consider some of the strengths that neurodivergent women bring to the workplace. These strengths are often reported by neurodivergent individuals. And by that, I mean people who are autistic, dyslexic, have ADHD, dyspraxia or dyscalculia. And neurodiverse, as you can see, individuals can bring a huge number of strengths to the workplace. And it was quite interesting because the Neurodiversity in Business survey that was compiled last year in 2023 by researchers at Birkbeck University found in their survey of 990 neurodivergent employees and workers that they identified 80% of them identified as a strength of theirs as being able to hyperfocus. 78% suggested that they were very creative compared to their peers. 75% saw their strength as being innovative thinking, and 71% it was processing and being analytical, and 58% considered themselves to be visual thinkers, and 55% considered they had a good strength in long-term memory. So as you can see, there are a number of strengths there. And it was quite interesting when I had a look at this survey, thinking about today's presentation and also to focus on some of the areas of strength. And then I don't know if any of you are aware of the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report that was conducted also last year. And they found that cognitive skills were deemed the top skill requirement of 2023. And of that, analytical thinking and creative thinking were the first and second top skill that was identified as being extremely important for the future of organisations. Now, if you look at those strengths across the board there, you've got attention to detail, problem solving, being innovative. And if you go back to that former slide that I shared with you, you can see that there's quite a mirroring of traits there. And I think it's quite interesting to take that into consideration. If you think about also where we are in terms of the world, in the terms of the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of disruption in the global economy. Businesses are having to think creatively about how they bridge some of the gaps in the disrupted, for example, supply chains, how they can think strategically about continuing to grow and to remain competitive and continue to innovate and come up with alternative ways of working. These are key skills, are some of the ways that neurodivergent women can contribute to the success of organisations going forward. And if ever there was a compelling case to consider neurodiverse talent within organisation, I think it's there in front of us today. What I also found quite interesting in this report was that skills, reading, writing, mathematics and manual dexterity were considered less important. And you might ask yourself, but why? Well, a lot of technology has been created that can do a lot of these things for you. We have assistive technologies that can read, that can create writing and concise writing pieces for you, can check your spelling and grammar, even check mathematical calculations. So all of those skills that used to be very traditionally required have become less so over the years. So how do we support neurodivergent women to thrive at work? And I think one of the key things is that WISE is breaking down those stereotypes of championing career choices and career progression for women in science and engineering. And they can work in all sectors. And I think, I don't want to stereotype. And I think often we can fall into that category of wanting to stereotype, but I think we need to kind of move away from that because, although they may have a hidden disability, you may not even be aware of it, and they can thrive extremely well at work. You may find colleagues of yours who are neurodivergent and they are working in senior management at director level, because a person cannot just be defined by their disability. They have many other skills that they can bring to the organisation. And I think sometimes, we can focus too much on what people can't do as opposed to what they can bring to the workplace. And so I think some of the challenges that women do face in the work often is that they are undiagnosed. They can be diagnosed later in life. And they're less likely to have the support of adjustments in place. And that's one of the key things that we see. Also, they can have lower well-being. You mentioned in that slide previously where you all contributed, burnout is a key one, not being understood. And they're more likely as a result, perhaps, to be seen to leave an organisation because they haven't had the support in place. And that came out of a study last year, as well as part of the neurodiversity and business survey. So some key and compelling information there to take away from today. But how can you support an individual to succeed at work? Well, some of the things that are found to be quite useful is a diagnostic assessment. Sometimes, people are struggling, it impacts their mental health, they're suffering from burnout, and often then they know that there's something else going on, but they can't quite put their finger on it, or they have an inclination that they may be showing traits associated with certain neurodevelopmental conditions. And often we found that by having a diagnostic assessment or a screening, that can be a way of enabling that individual to understand what is actually going on. And it can be often a sense of relief for many people. It also enables them to advocate more successfully because they know what's going on and why they are having the challenges that they're having in some areas of what they're doing at work. And also it can be quite reassuring to actually know that, that is the reason. It's that big kind of aha moment that a lot of individuals can feel as well. And it provides that level of explanation as to why they've had the challenges that they've had, not just in the current workplace, but perhaps at school, as young adults, etc. But one of the key things that we find is very important way of supporting individuals at work is through a workplace needs assessment. And by that, we focus on the challenge. It doesn't matter if that individual has a diagnosis or not. What we're concerned about is where are their challenges and what we can do to support them in overcoming those challenges at work. And that's the area that we tend to focus on, because even if you were to apply for access to work funding, which is a government funding grant that allows people to buy some of the technology or have the strategy coaching to support that individual, they don't even require a diagnosis to get the support that that individual might need. So there's lots of things that you can do. There's strategy coaching to support with, for example, time management, organisational skills, co-coaching with the line manager, because often we find that that's an area where perhaps more support is required. There's a lot of focus on the individual, but often it's the line manager that needs support as well. And we can offer that through awareness training. And also assistive technology. There's lots of technologies out there that can support individuals irrespective of whether you are neurodiverse or not. I prefer to call them productivity tools because I think we can all benefit from using these tools. And I'm sure many of you are currently using them yourselves, such as voice to text software on your mobile phones, for example. And again, awareness training, just building that awareness of understanding of some of the challenges and where also people can thrive and the strengths that individuals can bring to their roles. I think it's understanding the balance between those is really important as well to succeed in the workplace. But we talked, you touched on it when you provided me with your responses earlier around burnout and energy levels. And I think that's something that often, it's not really talked about in terms of how much that can impact on particularly women in the workplace. And it's the cognitive load, and that can come in many sorts of forms, and it can present in many ways. For example, a neurodivergent woman might be masking all day so that she fits in a neurotypical way, but that can lead to quite extensive exhaustion, to the point where I've had clients say to me, by the time I get home, I'm just so exhausted. All I want to do is eat some food and go to sleep, because there's nothing left in the batteries to continue. And if you think about that persistently year after year, how that can really be quite draining on an individual, and then the impact on mental health as well. And I think those are some of the things that, we're not always aware of, the underlying impact that it's having, because they can present very well in the workplace. We're very aware of that at PAM. We have a lot of support in place to support women as well, whether they're newly diagnosed and coming to terms with the diagnosis, whether they've got underlying mental health challenges as well. We have counsellors that specifically work with individuals who are neurodiverse, and so we can provide them with a lot of support. And we also know that going through the menopause can be another area where it can intensify experiences and impact on mental health. But coming to the end of my talk now, just to also talk about how we can empower and going beyond the individual. I touched on it earlier when I mentioned about, organisations being more aware, line managers having the tools and the awareness as well. But all I know is that, from my own experience of working in this area for over 10 years now, attitudes and perceptions of disability are changing. The environment in which we live and work is also changing. And preconceptions associated with, neurodiverse individuals is changing. And that sense of otherness has started to be seen as a positive. And people, are multifaceted, and they just don't need to be defined by one thing because they're neurodiverse or they're not. It's about looking at the whole individual, and also considering how you practice at work and the kind of culture that you foster, so that people feel safe to come forward to disclose. And also to champion with role models, thinking about your own organisations. Is there more that you could be doing to support neurodivergent individuals, including women at work? So these are just a couple of the other services that we offer, just to make you aware, but do please feel free to get in touch if there's anything that I've covered today that you're interested in finding out a bit more, or if you're looking for some support, then I'll be more than happy to talk to you. But thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Nina. That was a really great way of setting the scene, with the definition of neurodiversity and the reframing of the strengths associated with neurodiverse people in the workplace, and also all the services that PAM offer as well. So thanks so much for that. I'm going to hand over to our second speaker now, Lucy Barratt-Smith. So Lucy, over to you.
Thanks, Jack. I'm hoping you've got my slides ready to share. If not, I can share them here. But
we do indeed. Yeah,
you've got them. Brilliant. So, hi everyone. If you want to just pop to the first slide, Jack. I'm Lucy, and I was diagnosed with what was known as Asperger's, so an autism spectrum condition, when I was 10 back in 2002. I'll be honest, I didn't really understand what it meant. My parents did tell me, but it didn't really mean much to me. But what it did do was it did get me the support I needed in school. And people often ask, well, how did your parents know? It was not that common at that point for girls especially to sort of seek diagnosis. And I think my mum said she could tell there was something a little bit different about me. I really didn't like going to bed with a messy bedroom. Really didn't like it. I absolutely refused. I had what I can now see are sort of special interests in things like stickers, headbands, stationery. But what really where it really came to a point that my parents knew they needed to sort of seek some guidance was when I went to at that point we had middle school, so we had first school, middle school and high school, and so I went into year 5, which was the first year in middle school, and I got given a detention, and I think from what I remember it was because I didn't get dressed fast enough after PE, and I was absolutely beside myself. I was not the type of student that you would expect to get a detention, and I was just not a happy bunny at all. And I think just from a culmination of things, my parents thought, look, we need to just try and get some guidance and understand what's happening here. And at that point, they were fortunate to have some friends who'd actually had a son that had gone for a diagnosis, so passed on those details, and at that point that's when they took me for my diagnosis, and that's when I was diagnosed with Asperger's. So I would say, just for a bit of background, I graduated with a degree in marketing and branding from Nottingham Trent University in 2013, and then I joined AtkinsRealis as a creative project manager just over 4 years ago, back in 2020. And actually what's been really nice is that having been more open about my condition and learning about it more myself, I would say, for the past 4 years, it's really been really heartwarming to hear from people who have children that are potentially seeking a diagnosis, where they've said to me, you've given me hope that my child will still be able to have a successful career, which it makes me so sad to think that that would be a concern for people, but I can understand, especially with some of the stigma, why that might be. So I stumbled across our neurodiversity network a couple of weeks into starting here, and it was last year that I actually got asked to sit on the steering group with about there's less than 10 of us on there, so that was a real honour, because I've found myself sort of being drawn towards every opportunity I can to raise awareness and educate people around neurodiversity and what that actually means. So I'm not an expert. This is all really my first-hand experience, but I have learned a hell of a lot over the past 4 years, some of which I'll talk you through today. So just to give you a bit of an idea about what being neurodivergent means to me. So I'm a real logical, literal thinker, and this can often help in terms of problem solving. So there'll be a problem and everybody will be trying to approach it the same way, and I can often come in and say, well, let's just think about this a little bit differently. And with that, often thinking about the bigger picture. So why is this happening? What's going on? Let's try and get to the root cause. I would say I'm actually I really like the fact I'm a bit of a left and right brain thinker, so I've still got that creativity inside me, which is really nice. And I do have, I've been told I have very good attention to detail, much to the frustration of our graphic designers, who I'm the first to spot a typo, or if there's a double space or something not quite right, and they'll say, how have you spotted that in a matter of seconds? I am also able to hyper focus, so I can probably get about 4 hours worth of work done in an hour, but that does also mean using up four times as much energy in a short space of time. And I'm a real empath, so there's a bit of a myth that autistic people can't read emotions. I'm the total opposite, and I really feel other people's emotions as though I'm living them myself, which, if I'm honest, makes me not such a good line manager. I'm a great mentor, I'm a great coach, but not so much a line manager. So that's something that I've learned about myself over the past few years as well. On to the next slide. So I try to think not so much of these as challenges, but things that use up more of my energy. It's not to say I can't do them, I just have to take it into consideration how it's going to impact my day, for example. So change is a really big one for me, and that is quite a common trait especially if it's last minute and it's something that's out of my control and it's going to throw my whole schedule. If somebody throws a meeting in last minute that I'm not prepared for, I've got much better at knowing how to handle those situations, but it does bring on the anxiety. Being given multiple tasks at the same time, and my parents always used the example when I was younger, and they'd ask me to empty the dishwasher and do the hoovering, and I'd be saying, oh, I can't do both at the same time, so how on earth do you expect me to do that? And they'd sort of have to give me a bit of a rota, which worked much better. Social situations, particularly with people I don't know well, that really does use up a lot of energy for me. I'm very conscious of making sure I'm presenting myself in the right way, and you might have heard the term masking. So that's almost putting on a bit of a front in front of people so that you do come across in what is, I suppose, socially acceptable, a socially acceptable way. And learning how to unmask is something that I've been doing, but it does come with, what is expected and accepted as a society, and trying to just bear that in mind at the same time, and how that might sort of impact a particular situation or circumstance. And with that, new places or experiences, it's that fear of the unknown for me. Having to process or respond to information quickly, so it sometimes takes me a little bit of time just to process something, and rather than coming back straight away, I have learned to say, let me take that away and I'll come back to you. And sort of that last point really touches on being an empath, so handling emotional situations. And that's not just, if I'm struggling or having a bit of a down day, that's also excitement and positive situations. I sort of experience them on a bit of a magnified scale. So I just have to bear that in mind. Okay, so what I wanted to share on this call is really things that we've been doing at AtkinsRealis within the neurodiversity network to try and make our place of work more inclusive. For anybody that doesn't know, AtkinsRealis is a design, engineering and project management company. So we're global. There's, I think, around 35,000 employees. So you may well have heard of us, but yeah, we've built a really strong neurodiversity network employee resource group, and we've been working using our combined knowledge and efforts to put things in place. And 3 things I just wanted to mention that we've been doing are office design. So we've actually developed a guide, which I'll share with you in the chat, around neuro-inclusive office design, thinking about sensory, people that are hyposensitive and hypersensitive, and how we can think about that with the different senses, and sort of taking that into consideration when designing office space, which is something that we as a business specialise in, but also something that's been quite important to us as we've actually acquired new office space over the past few years. The second one is training. So that's not just sort of training in terms of, our learning management platform. That's also having representation across the business and allies across the business that can support us through the webinars that we run, blogs and news articles, events, things like that. And that's made a real difference, because having that more senior sort of leadership involvement, it just gets that message out there more. And the third one is recruitment. And this is something that I am going to talk about in a little bit more detail. And the good thing with some of the things I'll talk about in regards to recruitment is that it's transferable. So even if you're not directly involved in recruitment yourself, some of the things that I'm going to share with you could apply to having a meeting, which I'm sure we all do. Pretty regularly, or also things like training, if you're delivering a training course, or whether that's in person or remotely as well. So there's quite a lot of transferable sort of tips and hints in here, which you might be able to put into place yourself. So on to the next slide. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the last time you applied for a job, and just have a think about what feelings you experienced during that process. You don't need to tell me, just have a think about it, and I'm sure there'll be some common themes that we're all sort of having the same thoughts around. Now, one of those that comes up quite a lot, and I can definitely say from my own experience, is that anxiety, that nervousness. Of course, there's excitement there if it's something that you're really excited about, but definitely that fear of the unknown. And Jack, if you just want to go to the next slide. So really, this is thinking about the candidate journey and what that looks like, and each of those stages, how can we remove that fear of the unknown? So the first stage that we're going to think about is job adverts. And one thing, I actually did some research and I found that there was a report from Hewlett Packard, HP, that found that men will apply for a job when they meet only 60% of the qualifications, but women will only apply if they meet 100% of them, which I thought was really, really interesting. So I think something here is about taking that into consideration, making the role and responsibilities really clear. So we often see things like an excellent communicator. Well, for someone who's autistic, and I can speak from my own experience, something as ambiguous as that, what does that even mean? Who am I going to have to be communicating with? How? What does that look like? Also using unambiguous gender neutral language. So you might have heard, or I can share actually a tool which is called a gender decoder, where you can paste in your job advert and it will pick out any language that is more lends itself more to a male audience, like strong or sort of that sort of language, versus language that tends to lend itself more to sort of females in terms of things like caring and that type of language. So this is quite a useful tool. It's something that I never really thought about before, but actually, if that job advert includes that language, is it going to lend itself or encourage more of a particular type of person to apply? And the other thing that I think is really important is including key details such as salary, working location expectations, working hours. There's no point getting into the second stage of the interview process and finding out that it's not a good fit. That's a waste of time for everybody. So being really upfront and transparent about this is only going to be in everyone's interests. And lastly, just I really would encourage, and Nina, I think you touched on this, but demonstrating examples of how the company is inclusive, including some success stories, because chances are, and if you want to go to the next slide, when we want to sort of talk about what the application process looks like, we want to be able to give people the opportunity to declare any conditions or anything that they might need, like reasonable adjustments, but we need to make sure that they're comfortable doing that. And really, if they can see that this is a company that really champions and encourages that diverse workforce, that is going to make somebody feel much more comfortable and inclined to share any conditions or disabilities than if a company isn't doing that. I can say myself, I've never disclosed my condition up front because for fear of that would then impact my chances of sort of being put through to the next stage of an interview, just purely because of the stigma that is associated and the stereotypes around being autistic and what that then might mean. So I think that with this piece, this application process, it's what does that process look like from start to finish? What's the expectation? Is there an in-person interview? Who will be involved? How will the candidate receive updates? But, will they get that via email, via a phone call? And giving them the opportunity to sort of ask, how can they get in touch if they need any more information? And the next slide. Okay, so interviews. I'm sure interviews are one of the times that people can feel the most nervous, and that the thing that can often bring on the most anxiety. And actually, if we think about it, being put in a Dragon's Den pitch style environment is not necessarily the best way to find out whether somebody's capable of a job or not. That fight or flight mentality does not always put you in the best position to be able to share your knowledge and your experience, as well as you could do otherwise. So I would really recommend thinking about, is an interview, a traditional interview scenario, the best way to find out if somebody is capable of that job? Is there the option for them to be able to present back you know, some sort of presentation through a pre-recorded sort of video, so that they're not having to do it directly in front of someone. They can then re-record themselves if they you know, if they stumble or something like that. But everybody is different, and everybody will you know, some people are quite happy to sit in a room and talk to people, that's fine, but just bearing that in mind. I would say some things that can help, though, if we are looking at a traditional interview scenario, is providing as much information ahead of time. What questions are they going to be asked? Sticking someone on the spot, again, is not necessarily going to be the best way to get that information out of them. Who will be interviewing them? What's their role? What's their relationship with this particular you know, role that they're hiring for, and how will the interview take place? So if it is in person, sharing videos or pictures of the building and the room so that they know what they're turning up to. These are the types of tips that can actually be really helpful, that are quite translatable for things like in-person meetings. Even sharing that information with clients in advance just reduces that anxiety. And if remotely, what software will be used? Providing, you know, things like download or setup instructions, that's also going to help. And I think something that is just worth bearing in mind in terms of the statistics is that I think the latest statistics that I saw was something like 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent in the UK. Now, I'm not sure that's the latest. There's possibly even more than that we don't know about. But from what I've read, 50% of those people don't even know it themselves. So chances are, whether that's a colleague, a candidate, a client, you are going to be working with somebody who is neurodivergent, and actually putting these things in place not only benefits that the candidate or the, you know, but it also benefits you, because you've got those things in place to be able to repurpose time and time again. Before we get to the last point, I just wanted to mention something. So if you head to the next slide, some research has been done by, I think it's Bath University, around adapting interview questions for autistic people. And I wanted to share this example with you here, because I think you'll agree that these questions are much more specific and are much more likely to get the information that the hiring manager or whoever it might be is looking for. And I'm going to include a link to that study and the findings in the chat afterwards. But I think this is a great way of trying to just break down what can be quite a broad question to something that's a bit more sort of specific, and kind of gives a better chance of getting the information that that you're looking for. And then we'll just head to the next slide. Okay, so the last stage being that offer stage, really making sure that there is as much information at that offer stage as possible. So salary, employee benefits, any specific information that the candidate needs to give to be able to accept the offer. Could that be references, start date, things like that. Giving them a contact that they can get in touch with if they have questions, and detailing the onboarding process and what happens next. Of course, if they aren't successful, then making sure that they know that they've not been successful and that they understand why, and making sure that that is followed up as quickly as possible, so that they've got that information to work with. And then just to summarize, so the point here is that everyone, neurodivergent or not, thinks differently, and that just essentially means that we all approach things differently. So trying to make sure that we can get the best out of people by understanding how they work and how we can work to their strengths, I think, is really important. Sometimes a real little effort can have a huge impact. It doesn't need to cost money. And once you've done it once you've got that process in place, it's there for you to use. And if you really want to know if it works, or you want that honest feedback, ask for input from neurodivergent people. Well, I hope there's been some useful bits from that session, and I'll hand back over to Jack. Thank you, everyone.
There absolutely has been. Thank you so much for that, Lucy. It was really great to hear you bring your personal experience into that presentation as well. There were so many practical tips, especially around the recruitment, and those examples of the questions for me especially were really insightful as well. So I'll hand over to our third speaker now. We've got Beata Tofil joining us from Balfour Beatty. So Beata, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jack. And what Lucy and Nina said, I couldn't agree more. And a little bit about why I'm here. 2 reasons, really. I worked for Balfour Beatty for 15 years. I'm a line manager, but most important, I'm a mother of the autistic girl, Alice, who's absolutely incredible. But I also see how every single day it can be very difficult for her. And as Lucy said, how worried I am about her future because of those challenges that Alice has. So last year I have joined the Balfour Beatty Affinity Network for Neurodiverse. So my aim was to make changes, make the impact. So kids like Alice and everyone can actually see the difference in the workplace. So could I have the next slide, please? So I truly believe everyone is responsible and everyone has a responsibility to act on this. And we need input from everyone, from exec team, from line managers, from employees, from supply chain. And I truly believe it's about everyone. And the way we work, could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So how we look at it as a business is from the staff retention point of view and for the recruitment point of view. So all those points that Nina and Lucy were covering, that's what we're trying to address. The first one is neurodiversity affinity network support. So what we have as the neurodiversity affinity network, we engage with all the Balfour Beatty businesses, but also with supply chains. We truly believe we can also make the influence on supply chain. What we do as a business for the clients, we have subcontractors, we have suppliers. So we truly believe we can make influence on them as well. So the affinity networks work in 4 pillars. The first one is education. So education is about the awareness and training. We truly believe the awareness and training is the key to make a change. The next one is creation of the inclusive workspaces. And you know, this is what you were saying about creating safe space for people so they can actually share what they need to perform better or to feel more comfortable at work. It's for the line managers to create that space for the team and the employees so they feel comfortable and safe to share those needs. That there might be a little changes, there might be slight changes, as you said, Lucy, but it might be a little bit more. It might be a software or hardware that they need. Yeah, but it's actually having that ability to share that and not fear that might actually jeopardize anything, you know, what you're doing professionally. It should be just part of normal day to day. Yeah. So part of that creation of inclusive workspaces, we have various support. We have software and hardware. We've got reading pens. We've got Dragon software. We've got stationery, like paper overlays. We have environment adjustments as well. Things like desk locking. What we found was the big open spaces, you know, which are modern and champion. The feedback we have from the allies and the neurodiverse people who are part of our network, that doesn't really work. They want to be able to come back to work actually to the same desk. So that simple, small solution like desk locking make massive impact on many people. So there is software and hardware, but also the environmental, which we call the adjustments. Things like noise cancelling headphones. They are life changes for many people who I've spoke to. They really make massive impact for the way they work and how they can focus and how they perform and how they feel daily. So we also encourage all our employees to do all those little things which really go a long way, like changing the phone to Arial size 12. Yeah, simple thing, but make a massive difference. Keep the cameras on a Teams meeting. send the agenda before any Teams meeting or any sort of meeting, so people can actually be prepared. And, you know, the common thing like volunteering someone to take notes, don't do that. Do not volunteer anyone yourself to take notes. Yeah, there are really, really simple little things, but they can actually make a massive impact. The third thing is to support colleagues. So supporting colleagues who are neurodiverse, but also who are looking after neurodiverse children, siblings, family members. We truly believe the carers are same important as well, because they can actually help neurodiverse family members and children. So we are fully aware that most of women with ADHD, they get diagnosed in late 30s, 40s, and we work very closely with the mental health first aiders, because unfortunately a lot of times, you know, because of misdiagnosis with women, they usually get diagnosed with that depression for many years. And that was the case with my daughter. Ali's been diagnosed for many, many years with depression. So the misdiagnosis took place because she's a quiet girl and she felt low. But all those reasons were because of her autism, which was undiagnosed, and she had no support. So we work with the mental health first aiders as well to support any cases that are around the neurodiversity as well. What we also have is we have very strong affinity network and the allies group. So people can actually find the colleague. We have regular gatherings, regular catch-ups, coffee connections. We creating this year a parents forum, because we find the diagnosis process for any neurodiverse conditions, they are very difficult, not only for anyone really, for anyone that is going through the diagnosis process or who is looking after someone going through the diagnosis process. So we feel that if I would know what I know now 5 years ago, it will be a totally different world. And those little conversations that might take place, you'll feel supported at work. If you coming across any wall and you can speak to your colleagues, that can make a massive difference as well. We also supporting through the diagnosis process, and we also have menopause support group, which Nina was talking about, and that is very, very close link with that as well. So recruitment, that is absolutely, that's the second stream out of those four, which is very important. And as far as we concern as well, 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent, and 73% of autistic people who are unemployed, they say they want to work. So, and there is estimation between 15 and 20% that young children are neurodiverse. So the talent pool is out there, but what we need to influence a lot about how we recruiting. Yeah, and that's, as Lucy says, it starts from the job description. Then it's the interview process, onboarding process, yeah, and creating that safe space. So I've attended quite a lot of career pathway networks when I listen to the feedback of young people where they come for the interview and that interview doesn't work for many reasons. It might be a small thing like walking through the very busy office. Yeah, it might be the way that the questions are asked, the room. There are all environmental changes that can be quickly addressed apart from the job description. Yeah. So inclusive hiring, that is the very, very big thing that what we currently working on with line managers as well, because the recruitment team is one thing, but actually the line managers who are performing interviews and onboarding, they are really the closest people who can make a difference. Yeah. So next slide, please. So as I said, what we're trying to do is to retain and attract new talent. Yeah, and part of that awareness with the recruitment and the line managers, education and awareness sessions, just to make sure we can actually reach that talent. Yeah. So identifying in support of the barriers. the network, the affinity network for neurodiversity we have is critical, because we get then feedback, which is we are the midway of the two-way communication between all our employees and exec team who can actually make the change. Yeah. So the people can actually be honest with us, and they can tell us what works, what doesn't work. If we trying to test any new supply of stationery or software or hardware, we include in all our working group people who can actually provide us with the very honest feedback, because that's what we need. So we're trying to help to build that inclusive culture. So we would engage with all the business units, and we would attend any events which are with the supply chain as well, because working with education and with the supply chain and with suppliers is really important. That communication, two-way communication, which I said about, is really a key. Not everyone is not brave, but want to actually speak out in front of directors, in front of peers, and actually say what doesn't work. And we want to create that space in an affinity network where you can actually say what you think. Yeah, because that's the only way you can make a difference, if you've got honest feedback from our employees. Experience of we talk to the apprentices, we talk to the new employees about the journey of the onboarding, and we can actually learn from those journeys and make those changes. That is so critical, that people would share those stories with us. But we also act as a signposting to our members and employees, because sometimes there might be adjustments or little change in the way they work, but we don't know where to go. Should I go to my line manager? Should I go to the occupational health? Where do I go? So we're trying to filter all of that and guide them through that process. And the collaboration, it really is a key, especially for big businesses. The collaboration is something that would only make the culture change. Yeah. Next slide, please. So what we do, we engage with businesses, and like I said, we raise awarenesses. And what I've mentioned before about mental health first aiders, that is a really, really, really big thing we do. And there is a lot of cases we picking up, and we trying to help where the people are going through initially from the mental health first aiders. Collaboration, this week in the neurodiversity week, it's a big celebration of that week. So we have activities all week, and we're trying to engage everyone, line managers, employees, and we creating the webinars and the awareness session. And actually the feedback what we had from line managers, they sometimes feel, oh, I'm not sure if I can ask that question. Is it something I can ask? Is that all right? Is that not all right? But what we're trying to say, yes, it is all right. So what we've done, we've recorded a lot of podcasts with the experiences from the neurodiverse employees, and they actually say, it is all right, ask me. Yeah, ask me, I want to have that conversation. So we're trying to spread that awareness. So talking neurodiversity would be like talking about anything else. Yeah, it will become something that we don't need to raise awareness about anymore. It would be a subject that everyone can talk anytime. So Parents Forum, like I've mentioned before, it's a really important thing for many employees. Many employees are really getting a lot of support from that. We truly believe it helps a lot of people. And like I said before, the impact on the supply chain it's a big responsibility, and we work for many clients and many suppliers and subcontractors, and we believe we can influence a change out there as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Beata. And
Thank you.
I really like the model with the 4 pillars and like breaking down exactly how the network supports the organisation as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
So we're going to give the Q&A a miss, just because I mean all the presentations were so good. I didn't want to interrupt any of them because we were getting so much kind of like useful information and really great like framing from them. But I know that all the panelists will be more than happy for you to reach out to them directly if you have any questions. You can also reach out to us at Wise and we can pass those on to any of the panelists if you'd like to do it that way too. We've got some other really interesting events coming up with Wise over the next couple of months, looking at imposter syndrome, a hybrid event looking at digital inclusion and human-centered computing, which is shaping up to be really interesting, and also looking at reverse mentoring and how it can really support diversity and inclusion in your business as well. There's a QR code on screen there, which is a link to an event feedback form. And we're always really excited and happy to have feedback. And I'm sure that the three speakers are keen to hear your thoughts too. There'll also be a link in the chat too. So please take a couple of minutes to complete that if you'd like to. And I think, is that the last slide, Chardonnay? I think it might well be. The last thing for me to do is just to say thank you so much to Nina, Lucy, and Beata today. I personally got so much from all three of your talks, and it was really interesting for me to listen to, and I'm sure the audience shared that as well. Thanks everyone for coming along as well. I hope you enjoyed today, and hope you enjoyed the rest of your days.